You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hello, and thanks for joining Revolution 250, where we look at events that took place 250 years ago this week. This is from the American Revolution Podcast, just a short bonus episode to remind you about these important anniversaries from the Revolutionary War. This week, we remember the first National Day of Fasting and other events from the week of July 16th, 1775. By the second half of July 1775, the siege of Boston had settled into, well, a siege. Both sides sat behind their lines and awaited more action. George Washington had taken command of the Continental Army just a few weeks earlier and was still assessing the army and the situation. British Commander Thomas Gage had been rocked by British losses at Bunker Hill a month earlier and was also trying to wait for more information from London about what to do next. In the meantime, he had instituted martial law, ended all civilian movement in or out of Boston, established a curfew, banned the sale of alcohol, and jailed civilians still in town who he believed to be disloyal. Elsewhere in the country, others were taking action. On July 17, 1775, a group of Loyalists captured Fort 96 on the South Carolina frontier. They were able to do this when Militia Captain Moses Kirkland, who had seemed to favor the Patriots, switched sides while defending the fort against 200 Loyalist militia. Kirkland helped turn the fort over to the Loyalists and join their side. He would later go on to become a Loyalist officer during the war. The rest of the fort's defenders were imprisoned in the fort under the control of the Loyalist militia. The Continental Congress in Philadelphia was also still trying to get onto a war footing. On July 18th, the Congress passed recommendations that all colonies pass uniform organization and equipment standards for the state militia and provide armed vessels to protect harbors and coastlines. On that same day, General Philip Schuyler finally arrived at Fort Ticonderoga to get that fort organized. This was more than 2 months after Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold had captured it. A few days later, General Schuyler would send a scouting party under the command of Major John Brown to gather intelligence for a potential invasion of Canada. On that same day, the 18th, that Philip Schuyler arrived at Fort Ticonderoga, down in North Carolina, the royal governor, Josiah Martin, had to flee Fort Johnston on the coast and take shelter on a British Navy ship. That night, the Patriot militia, under the command of Colonel Robert Howe, burned the fort to the ground. On July 20th, the nation held its first national day of public humiliation, fasting, and prayer, something that Congress had called for just over a week earlier. Both the Continental Army and civilians used this day to call upon God to help them to get through this difficult time. Many people attended church services that Thursday, listening to sermons about the need to be strong and to sacrifice for the war effort. Not everyone was sitting in church that day. A group of soldiers in New York, led by Marinus Willett and Alexander McDougall, raided a British military storage facility at Turtle Bay in Manhattan. They captured a cache of arms and ammunition, which they forwarded to the Continental Army around Boston. The next day, July 21st, Benjamin Franklin made the first proposal to establish Articles of Confederation to provide some legal basis for the continuation of the Continental Congress. Up until this time, the Continental Congress had been operating as an ad hoc organization without any real rules or authorization to do anything. Of course, this would continue for quite some time, as it would take another 6 years to get the articles drafted and ratified. I hope you've enjoyed this Revolution 250 moment. For more of the story, please visit your favorite podcast platform, such as Apple or Spotify, and subscribe for free to the American Revolution Podcast.